Hello, and welcome back to another breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and you were watching Boyd News. Well, thank you so much for tuning in today. I've got some breaking news coming out from Russia to share with you. So, we're going to be talking about Vladimir Putin, the Russian president. Okay, so he made a major statement today while he was speaking with VIkTOR Orban, the Hungarian prime minister. That's him on the left side of the screen in the blue tie. And while they were holding a press conference in Moscow today, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that Moscow supports a complete and final end to the Ukraine conflict rather than some kind of truce or ceasefire. Okay, so what do we know? In the last couple weeks, Vladimir Putin made a ceasefire proposal to Ukraine to let them know that Vladimir Putin was willing to end this war and call for a ceasefire, but under certain conditions. They did state that Ukraine would have to pull their troops away from the front line on the eastern side of the country, away from all the regions that have been annexed, the Donetsk region, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions. And then at the same time, Ukraine was not allowed to join NATO. That if they would agree to those two terms, they would officially end this war in Ukraine and there would be a ceasefire immediately. And Russia came out and said this. Putin said that they would immediately hold a ceasefire if Ukraine would agree to that. And immediately what happened? Well, Ukraine disagreed with this, declined the opportunity to hold a ceasefire in Ukraine, and also the West backed this as well and said, no, we're not going to have any kind of a ceasefire, and we're not going to allow Russia or Vladimir Putin to make demands when he was the one who invaded Ukraine. That actually came from the Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, okay? So we're going to talk some more about this visit with VIkTOR Orban. He's here in Moscow right now to meet with Vladimir Putin, and he was actually just with Vladimir Zelensky just a couple days ago, meeting in Kiev. Okay, and while he was there, he was trying to push for Kiev to move to some sort of ceasefire agreement with Russia. So definitely trying to, for the most part, it looks like he's kind of siding with Russia, trying to go ahead with Russia's plan here to get a ceasefire in Ukraine. But again, the Russian president wants Ukraine to pull away from the front line, take their troops away, and also, again, not join NATO. So I don't think that's something that Ukraine is going to want. But VIkTOR Orban is definitely trying to push for that and help out Moscow here by visiting as well, which we're going to be talking about that some more here in this article. This is on AA. It says, Putin says Russia wants complete and final end to Ukraine conflict. Russian president argues Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky avoids peace talks because it would require him to lift martial law and hold presidential election, which he cannot win. So apparently, according to Vladimir Putin here, that's one of the reasons why that Zelensky does not want to have peace talks with Russia is, again, here because it's saying that he will lift martial law in the country and they'll have to hold a presidential election, which he will not win. Okay, so Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Friday that Moscow supports a complete and final end to the Ukrainian conflict rather than some kind of truce or ceasefire. Putin, however, reiterated his demand that Ukrainian forces must withdraw from the Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions during a press conference in Moscow after meeting with Hungarian Prime Minister VIkTOR Orban. Okay, so again, in order to get a complete and final end to the war, not just a ceasefire, he again is demanding that Ukrainian forces withdraw from the front line on the eastern side of their country. Other terms are a subject for consideration, he added. Russia is committed to complete and definitive resolution of the conflict. The conditions for this are outlined in my speech to the Foreign Ministry. The withdrawal of all troops from the Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia regions. There are other conditions which are subject for consideration in the course of possible joint work. Now, we don't know exactly what those are, but I notice here that what we're not seeing is any talk about Ukraine joining NATO, which we did hear from Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, that he announced that Ukraine would try to join sometime in the next 10 years. So it doesn't look like Ukraine will be part of NATO anytime soon. And I also saw some reports a few days ago, I think it was on the Telegraph, stating that Ukraine was going to be told they were too corrupt to join NATO, that they had to clean up their act there in their country in order to join. So that was some pretty big news too. So that tells me that it doesn't look like Ukraine is going to be joining NATO anytime soon. Putin argued that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky avoids peace talks because doing so would require him to lift martial law and hold a presidential election, and his chances of winning are close to zero. Regarding Russia's relations with the EU, Putin said they are currently at the lowest EBB and that he has discussed the future security architecture in Europe with Orban. During the talks, the Russian president said the Hungarian prime minister primarily expressed Western views, including those on Ukraine. We perceive the prime minister's visit as an attempt to restore dialogue and give it an additional impetus, Putin said. For his part, Orban said Hungary considers ensuring peace in Europe its main task during the presidency of the EU Council. For this purpose, he came to Moscow. I wanted to know what is the shortest way to end the war, and I wanted to know the president's opinion on 3 issues. What does he think about the existing peace initiatives on Ukraine, the possibility of a ceasefire and peace talks, what should be the order to hold them, and the vision of Europe after the war, he said. So obviously, one of the big things that Vladimir Putin here wants is that all the annexed regions of Ukraine need to remain as part of Russia, that Ukraine cannot get these back. And we'll have to see how Ukraine responds to this. But overall, I think that Vladimir Zelensky will not want any kind of ceasefire anytime soon. But we do know that we had some reports just a couple weeks ago of Vladimir Zelensky coming out and stating that they had many dead and wounded on the battlefield, especially like in the Donetsk region, which is also, I did a report yesterday on Chasiv Yar, which is a very key city on the eastern portion of Ukraine. And that city is slowly starting to fall, okay? There was a piece of it that just fell yesterday, and the Russians are starting to move in and take Chasiv Yar now. So we do know that the Ukrainians are struggling to fight this war on the eastern side of their country. They're running out of men, and they may get pushed to some ceasefire at some point here in this war. So it says here as well, the Prime Minister emphasized that in recent years, there have been almost no countries that could have contact with both sides, and Hungary, is one of the few such countries, which I do know as well that the EU was apparently very upset with the fact that the Hungarian Prime Minister VIkTOR Orban visited Moscow, considering this is not part of EU policy as well, okay, for them to visit inside of Russia, considering the war that's going on and everything happening. And obviously the European nations are starting to fund Ukraine at the same time, so they're at war with Russia basically, and yet VIkTOR Orban, and also a NATO member, part of Hungary, the prime minister here also visiting Russia too, to obviously speak about these peace talks and everything going on in Ukraine. So definitely creating a lot of tension right now between the EU and Hungary. So it says here as well, there are still a lot of steps to be taken to get closer to the end of the war. We have made the most important step today by establishing contacts and will continue to work in this direction. So let's see if they can come to some sort of agreement at some point. But the problem I see here with this war really is with Vladimir Zelensky. Obviously, I think that could be true, that maybe he doesn't want to hold any presidential elections because he may lose them. Maybe that's something that he fears. But at the same time, the West is investing so much into Ukraine right now. They've given Ukraine billions upon billions of dollars and tons of weaponry, and I don't think the West is ready to end this war anytime soon. We've also heard as well from like Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, coming out and saying that we need to support Ukraine for as long as necessary until they win this war. So it looks to me like when it comes to the West, they're going to fund Ukraine to the very last Ukrainian, okay? They're going to continue to give weapons to Ukraine until they completely run out of troops or they win this war, is kind of how I see it. And then obviously Vladimir Putin has come out many times, wanted a ceasefire in Ukraine. Now he's calling for a complete and final end to the Ukrainian conflict. But let me know what your thoughts and opinions are with this down below. This is obviously a major development and huge news. So let me know what you think. Go ahead and comment down below, share your thoughts and opinions. If you got something out of this update, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell, that way YouTube can notify you. And with that, I hope y'all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless, and we'll see you in the next one.